She's keeping the house, the dog, and she just served me alimony papers. I was still in my deployment boots, standing in my own driveway, watching her fiancé, some gym rat, toss Duke a treat through the sliding glass door of my house, the one I built. While I was overseas dodging bullets, she was redecorating, draining our savings, and sliding his name onto the deed using my power of attorney. But see, I didn't just come home. I came back with a plan. Let's just say, the same trust she used to steal everything, I used to take it all back. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. My name is Michael Rourke, and I'm 37 years old. After 12 months as a private security contractor in Kandahar, I'm finally heading home to my wife Emma and our German shepherd, Duke, in our Oregon suburb. Each night overseas, I'd close my eyes and picture Emma's smile, hear Duke's excited bark, and smell sawdust from my workshop projects. Through firefights and endless patrols, those thoughts kept me focused. Emma, my wife of 8 years, managed our boutique fitness studio while I was gone, though lately her video calls felt different, shorter, distracted. Her usual warmth seemed to dim when I mentioned home improvements or weekend plans. My jaw tightened whenever she changed the subject about the studio's finances. What she doesn't know is that I've been quietly building a special renovation fund, padding it with each hazard pay bonus. But let me start from the beginning. The cab dropped me at our driveway around 2 in the afternoon. My boots felt heavy after 20 hours of travel, but my chest was light. Home. The autumn air smelled like wood smoke and fallen leaves, so different from Kandahar's endless dust and diesel fumes. I adjusted my duffel bag, taking in the familiar sight of our single-story ranch house. Emma's red Mazda sat in its usual spot, but there was also a lifted black pickup I didn't recognize. Must be a client's car from the studio, I thought. Emma had mentioned expanding their parking lot. The curtains caught my eye next, heavy charcoal panels instead of the cream ones we'd picked together. Probably just redecorating. But something in my gut tightened, the same instinct that had kept me alive overseas. I rang the doorbell, grinning through my exhaustion. Keys would have felt wrong after so long away. Quick footsteps approached, and there she was, Emma, my wife of 8 years, wearing yoga pants and a studio tank top. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Michael," she said, stepping back. No hug, no kiss. Just my full name, flat as a dinner plate. "Come in. We need to talk." The living room had changed too. Our old leather sectional was gone, replaced by some modern gray thing that looked like it belonged in a doctor's office. A man in a suit sat there, next to a younger woman with a messenger bag. They weren't friends. Their posture was too rigid, too professional. "These are Mr. Patterson and Ms. Rivera," Emma said, gesturing to the strangers. "They're here to make this official." Make what official? My throat went dry. The room felt like it was tilting. Emma pulled an envelope from behind a throw pillow I didn't recognize. "I'm filing for divorce, Michael. These are the papers." The word divorce hit me like a round to the chest. In Kandahar, I'd learned to read threats, to spot the telltale bulge of a vest, the subtle hand signal before an ambush. But this blindsided me completely. "I don't understand," I managed. "We just talked last week. You said everything was fine. Things change." Emma's voice had the same rehearsed calm she used with difficult clients at the studio. "I've moved on. Actually, I'm engaged." "Engaged?" The word came out like gravel. "To who?" As if on cue, heavy footsteps came from the kitchen. A guy built like a linebacker appeared, wearing compression shorts and a sleeveless shirt with Apex Fitness printed across it. He grabbed a protein shake from our fridge, my fridge, with the casual comfort of someone who'd done it hundreds of times before. "This is Brett," Emma said. "He's my business partner and fiancé." Brett gave me a nod, like we were passing at the gym. No shame, no hesitation. This wasn't new to him. The room spun. I steadied myself against the wall, feeling the fresh paint under my palm. They'd redecorated. They'd planned this. A bark echoed from the backyard. Duke. I started toward the sliding glass door, desperate for something familiar, something real. "Don't," Emma said. "He's staying with me." I turned back, my hands shaking. "He's my dog." "You left him. For a year." She lifted her chin. "The papers are clear. I'm keeping the house and Duke. Your things are packed in the garage." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mrs. Rourke has already filed a temporary restraining order. Once you sign these papers, you'll need to maintain— How? I cut him off, staring at Emma. How did you do all this while I was gone? She met my eyes, and for a second I saw something flicker there. Not guilt, exactly. More like satisfaction. You gave me power of attorney before you left, she said. Remember? So I could handle the bills easily? My knees went weak. The power of attorney. I'd signed it to make her life simpler, to show I trusted her. Now the pieces started falling into place. The house, the accounts, everything I'd built. One question kept hammering in my head. How long had she been planning this? The first lawyer's office I found was wedged between a vape shop and a tax service, but I didn't care. I needed answers fast. The receptionist took one look at my face and squeezed me in between appointments. Let me get this straight, Mark Jensen, Eskier said, peering at me over reading glasses. You granted your wife power of attorney before deployment? For bills and basic stuff, I said, my hands clenched on the armrests. The leather squeaked under my grip. Not for this. He shuffled through the divorce papers, lips pressed thin. Unfortunately, Mr. Rourke, a general power of attorney is quite broad. Unless specifically restricted, it allows the agent, your wife, to conduct nearly any financial or property transaction on your behalf. My stomach dropped. But she added another man's name to our house deed. That can't be legal. With power of attorney? He leaned back, sighing. It absolutely is. Unless you can prove fraud or breach of fiduciary duty, the transfer stands. The room felt too small suddenly, like those cramped transport vehicles in Kandahar. There has to be something we can do. There might be. He pulled out a yellow legal pad. But you'll need evidence she planned this deception before you deployed. Emails, texts, bank records showing suspicious transfers. Without that, he spread his hands. The court generally won't invalidate properly executed property transfers. 2 hours and $400 later, I sat in my truck, staring at a rental application. The Desert Rose Motel glowed in neon across the street. $59.99 a night. Weekly rates available. A far cry from the home I'd spent 5 years renovating. You know what really got me? The smell when I walked into that room. Stale cigarettes and cheap air freshener, trying to cover God knows what. Back in Kandahar, I'd dream about the scent of Emma's lavender shampoo on our pillows, the way Duke's fur always made the bedroom smell like warm sunshine. I tried accessing our joint account to order dinner, but the card declined. Logged into my banking app to find everything frozen, pending divorce evaluation. Emma had thought of everything. Good thing I'd kept that deployment savings separate, or I'd be completely broke. The diner across the street took cash. I sat in a corner booth, picking at rubbery meatloaf, while my phone auto-played YouTube videos. Somehow, it knew to show me soldiers surprising their families, dogs going crazy with joy, kids screaming, "Daddy!" while wives filmed everything with tears in their eyes. I couldn't look away. That was supposed to be me, I whispered to my cold coffee. Later, lying on sheets that had seen better decades, a memory hit me like a punch to the gut. About 4 months into deployment, Emma had called with questions about VA loans. Just curiosity, she'd said. Something about one of her clients being a veteran having trouble with financing. It's such a great program, she'd said. The rates are amazing. How exactly does it work again? I'd explained everything, proud she was taking an interest in veteran affairs. Now I wondered, had she been planning even then? Taking notes? Figuring out how to use my benefits against me? The ceiling fan clicked with every rotation, like a timer counting down to something I couldn't see coming. My phone buzzed, a text from Emma's lawyer about property division consultation. The words blurred together. In Kandahar, I'd learned to sleep through mortar fire, but here, in this quiet room with its faded floral wallpaper, sleep felt impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma handing Brett that protein shake. The casual way he moved through my kitchen. The look on her face when she said Duke was staying with her. They'd been rehearsing their roles while I was dodging bullets, planning their future while I sent home love letters. Using my trust like a weapon while I sat up, my heart pounding. The VA loan question. There had to be a paper trail somewhere. Emma was thorough, but everyone makes mistakes. And if she'd used my VA benefits while holding power of attorney. The Desert Rose Motel felt smaller each day. The walls seemed to creep inward while I paced between lawyer calls, each one bringing fresh hell. My deployment gear sat untouched in duffel bags. I couldn't bring myself to unpack into this temporary life Emma had forced on me. You ever notice how betrayal changes the past? Little moments you dismissed suddenly light up like warning flares. That time, Emma insisted I update our wills before deployment. The way she'd cataloged our belongings for insurance purposes. Her casual questions about military benefits. All of it orchestrated, all of it groundwork. Mr. Rourke, my lawyer droned through another morning call. They've submitted additional affidavits. 3 of Emma's friends from the fitness studio claim you were emotionally unavailable before deployment. I barked out a laugh. Emotionally unavailable? I wrote her letters every week, sent care packages, called during firefights. They're painting a different picture. According to their statements, Emma confided the marriage was troubled months before you left. The ceiling fan wobbled overhead, throwing shadows across faded wallpaper. That's bull. We were fine. Ask our neighbors. Ask. Their statements also reference concerning texts you allegedly sent. My throat tightened. What texts? He shuffled papers. Screenshots showing you dismissed her concerns about the deployment. Something about doing what I have to do, and you knew what you signed up for. Christ. I remembered that conversation. We'd been discussing the contract length, and I'd meant those words reassuringly, that we were strong enough to handle separation, but twisted out of context. They're building a narrative, he continued. Distant husband, emotionally neglected wife. It's effective with judges, especially given the timing of your deployment. I pressed my forehead against the cool window glass. Outside, a neon vacancy sign flickered like a dying heartbeat. This isn't random, counselor. She planned this. All of it. I believe you. But without concrete proof she violated her fiduciary duties while holding power of attorney, it's her word against yours. After hanging up, I made the mistake of checking social media. Duke's tag pulled up recent photos. My German Shepherd in a ridiculous superhero cape, posted by Brett the Gym Rat himself. New family member loving his first Halloween. The comment section brimmed with heart emojis and congratulations. My hands shook. That dog was the only reason I'd made it through some nights in Kandahar. During video calls, Emma would hold him up to the camera, let me hear his excited whimpers. He misses his daddy, she'd say. Now I wondered, had she already been planning to take him then? The phone rang again. My lawyer, voice grim. Mike, they've filed additional motions. Emma's seeking alimony. The word hit like a physical blow. Alimony? I paid every bill while deployed, sent her extra spending money. She has a business. They're arguing her fitness studio isn't profitable yet, that she grew accustomed to a certain lifestyle during marriage, a lifestyle I provided while she was stealing my house, and that the deployment contract money constitutes ongoing income that should be factored into support calculations. I sank onto the bed's thin mattress. The springs creaked accusingly. She's using my combat pay to demand alimony? Mike, listen. We need to think strategically here. Her legal team is good. They've constructed a solid narrative. Devoted wife supports military husband, endures loneliness, business struggles while he's away earning significant hazard pay. He paused. Without evidence of wrongdoing during her power of attorney, the court may find their arguments compelling. Through the wall, I could hear my motel neighbors arguing about cigarettes and spare change. Such a far cry from my quiet street, my workshop, my dog. Everything I'd built, everything I'd fought for, Emma hadn't just taken it. She'd been plotting to take it all along. While I was securing convoy routes and dodging IEDs, she was securing lawyers. While I was writing her love letters, she was writing affidavits. While I was dreaming of coming home, she was stealing that home right out from under me. The phone buzzed with another email from her lawyer. More demands, more motions, more carefully constructed lies. But now I saw them for what they were. Not desperate moves by a lonely wife, but calculated steps in a long-planned campaign. My hands clenched into fists. How long? I asked my lawyer. Had she been planning this? You ever have one of those moments where reality just slaps you across the face? Mine came at a Chevron station just off Route 26, staring at a declined debit card message while my tank sat on empty. Want to try another card? The kid behind the counter couldn't have been more than 20. He had that look, you know the one, part pity, part secondhand embarrassment, like he was watching a man's dignity drain away one declined transaction at a time. No, thanks. I stepped back from the counter, my neck burning. Through the fingerprint-smudged window, I could see my reflection, still wearing my deployment boots because they were comfortable and familiar. Now they just looked out of place, like I was playing dress-up as my former self. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I walked out, that sound drilling into my skull like a dentist's tool. In the parking lot, a young couple was filling up their SUV, laughing about something. The woman leaned into the guy's shoulder, casual and trusting. I had to look away. Back at the motel, I lay on the bed watching headlights crawl across the ceiling. The fan clicked with each rotation. Click, 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 like a countdown. Each sound reminded me of another thing Emma had taken. Click. The house. Click. The dog. Click. My dignity at a gas station. Something inside me just snapped. I grabbed my phone and pulled up Dave's number. We'd served together years back, stayed in touch mostly through occasional texts and memes. Last I'd heard, he'd landed some corporate investigation gig in Portland. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard for a second before I typed, "You up? Need your expertise." The response came faster than I expected. Trouble? The nuclear kind. Ex-wife went scorched earth while I was deployed. Jesus. Give me details. I typed out the Cliff Notes version, the power of attorney, the house deed, the frozen accounts. When I mentioned Emma's new fiancé and the gym, Dave's reply was instant. "Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m., McMenamin's on Broadway. I'm buying." The next morning, Dave looked exactly like I remembered. Stocky build, salt and pepper beard, that same analytical gleam in his eyes. He listened without interrupting as I laid it all out. The strategic timing, the affidavits from concerned friends, the gym truck purchased somehow while I was overseas. And get this, I added, pushing my coffee aside. She's demanding alimony after stealing my house using my own power of attorney. Dave leaned back, his veteran's patch catching the light. Walk me through the timeline again. When exactly did she add lover boy to the deed? I pulled out my phone, found the document. March 15th, about 6 months into deployment. And the gym truck? Sometime in April. My lawyer found the registration. Dave's eyes narrowed. Using what funds? That's the thing. I can't figure it out. Our joint account didn't have that kind of cash. And she couldn't have qualified for that loan on her own. Unless, Dave tapped his fingers on the table, unless she used your VA loan eligibility. You were still married? Still had power of attorney? My stomach lurched. She wouldn't. Mike? Dave's voice was steady. She already did everything else. You're not crazy. My gut? She's hiding more. A lot more. He pulled out his laptop, opened a spreadsheet. Let's build this right. Every account, every credit card, every property change. When did she open the gym? Who's on the business license? We follow the money, we find the fraud. I watched him type, column after column. Account numbers, dates, dollar amounts. It felt good, familiar, like building a mission brief. This was something I understood. Gathering intel, identifying patterns, finding weaknesses. One thing, Dave said, looking up. When's your final hearing? November 20th. He checked his watch. 17 days from now. That's our countdown, brother. We need smoking gun proof of fiduciary breach, or you're screwed. I stared at the growing spreadsheet, at all the blank cells waiting to be filled. 17 days to uncover months of careful deception. 17 days to prove what I already knew in my gut, that Emma had orchestrated this whole thing like a military operation. Let's burn her story to the ground, I whispered, and for the first time in weeks, I felt that familiar pre-mission focus settling in. Dave pulled out his laptop, and I grabbed my old deployment notebook. For the next few hours, we turned that McMenamin's booth into a war room. Every receipt, every transfer, every suspicious timing, it all went into the spreadsheet. The coffee kept coming, and so did the revelations. Look at this, Dave said, turning his screen. Starting January. That's 3 months before you deployed. Small transfers. 200-300 at a time. All going to something called Elite Fitness Consulting. I leaned in, squinting at the numbers. Never heard of it. Emma's studio was called Core Power. Exactly. Dave's fingers flew over the keyboard. But guess who registered Elite Fitness Consulting? Your wife's new friend. 6 months before you even got deployment orders. The coffee in my stomach turned to acid. I remembered Emma's excitement when I told her about the deployment. At the time, I'd thought she was being supportive. Now? She knew. She knew I'd be gone, and she started planning. Gets better. Dave pulled up another document. 3 days after you landed in Kandahar, there's a withdrawal. Big one. He spun the laptop toward me. 19th to 147 and 22 hours. My hands clenched. That's impossible. I monitored our accounts. Joint checking, yeah, but this? Dave tapped the screen. This came from that secondary account she opened using the power of attorney. The one your lawyer probably doesn't even know about yet. She started draining me the second I stepped on that plane. The words came out hollow. We worked through dinner, then past midnight. The pile of evidence grew. PDFs of transfer records, printed bank statements, business filings for both gyms. Emma had been busy, real busy, while I was dodging bullets overseas. But everything was circumstantial. Courts need smoking guns, not suspicion. Around 2 a.m., Dave hit what looked like pay dirt, Emma's cloud storage. Most people forget to clear their access history, he said, typing faster. If she was planning this while you were gone, the proof would be there. But when the files came up, they were encrypted. Dead end. I slumped back, running my hands over my face. Maybe this is pointless. Maybe I should just... Stop. Dave's voice had that old sergeant's edge. She's arrogant, Mike. People like that? They always slip somewhere. They think they're too smart to get caught. He went back to typing, muttering about IP addresses and login histories. I stared at my coffee, now cold, thinking about Emma's face when she served those papers. No emotion, no guilt, like I was just another transaction to process. Hold up. Dave's voice snapped me back. Got something. Previous access point. Different IP than her usual one. More typing. She's been emailing back and forth with Muscleman. A lot. My throat tightened. About what? Give me a sec. There's attachments. PDFs. Spreadsheets. Dave's eyes narrowed. Well, one of them's called Moving Timeline. I leaned forward, heart pounding. Can you open it? Dave's fingers moved across the keyboard, and suddenly, there it was. A detailed schedule, dated 3 weeks before my deployment. Every step planned out. When to open new accounts, when to transfer funds, when to change the house deed. Even a note about Duke's vet records and changing microchip info. Jesus, I whispered. The coffee shop felt too small suddenly, the air too thick. This wasn't just betrayal. This was calculated, clinical. While I was writing her love letters from a war zone, she was plotting my financial execution. Dave kept scrolling through the emails. There's more. Looks like they were discussing timing. When to sell the house, how to handle the gym merger. He stopped, eyes widening slightly. Hold on. This might be what we need. Dave clicked the file open, and my world shifted. Right there on his laptop screen was a calendar, the kind Emma used to track class schedules at her studio. But these entries weren't about yoga or spin classes. These were timestamps of my destruction. Transfer lien, Thursday. File separation docs, Monday. Open sale draft, pending. Each entry lined up perfectly with my deployment schedule. She'd planned it like one of her workout routines, systematic, precise, with clear milestones and goals. Only instead of tracking reps and sets, she was tracking how to strip away everything I'd built. There's more, Dave said, his voice tight. He opened another file, an email chain between Emma and her new man. My stomach churned as I read their casual cruelty. He'll eat dirt when he gets back, Emma had written. And once the POA kicks in, we're golden. Her fiancé replied, Smart girl, Army boy won't know what hit him. The coffee I'd been drinking threatened to come back up. I'd been in firefights that felt less violent than reading those words. While I was writing her about missing home, about Duke, about our future, she was plotting with this guy about how to destroy me. Wait, Dave muttered, clicking through folders. Here. Sent mail. His cursor moved to another file and he double-clicked. The email that popped up was dated just 4 days ago. My hands started shaking as I read, To, Gym Guy. From, Emma. Subject, House Timeline. We need to move fast. List the place before he's back. I've got the realtor ready. Once it sells, we're clear. He can't touch the money after that. Meet tomorrow to finalize? Dave turned to me, his eyes hard. Mike, this is it. This proves intent to defraud. She's literally spelling out her plan to sell joint property without your consent, using authority from a power of attorney. Does this? I had to swallow to get the words out. Does this prove intent? Dave nodded grimly. Intent, premeditation, and fiduciary breach, all wrapped up in one neat little email. He leaned back, a hint of his old sergeant's smile showing. She got sloppy, brother. Left it right there in her sent folder. The McMenamins booth felt different suddenly. The air changed. For weeks, I'd been drowning in powerlessness, watching Emma and her lawyer dance circles around me. But now, remember that moment in combat when intel finally confirms your target? When all the pieces click and you know exactly what you're dealing with? That's what this felt like. Clarity, purpose, a clear shot. Dave was already pulling out his phone. "I'm calling your lawyer. First thing tomorrow, we file for an emergency hearing. This changes everything." I barely heard him. I was staring at those emails, at the casual way Emma had discussed ruining me. The woman who'd once promised to love me forever had turned into someone who could write, "He'll eat dirt," without a second thought. A memory hit me. Emma and me, painting the living room 3 years ago. Duke's tail had knocked over a paint tray, and we'd laughed so hard we had to sit down. She'd gotten paint in her hair, and I'd helped wash it out. That woman felt like a stranger now. "Mike?" Dave's voice pulled me back. "You with me?" I looked at my old squad mate, at the concern in his eyes, at the way he'd dropped everything to help me. This was what loyalty looked like. This was what Emma had forgotten. "Yeah," I said, my voice steadier than it had been in weeks. "I'm with you." Dave nodded and turned back to his laptop. "Let's get these files secured. Make copies. Then we'll—" "Dave? Yeah? Thank you. For believing me. For helping." He didn't look up from his typing, but I saw his jaw tighten. "Brother, in Kandahar, you had my six, every single day. About time I returned the favor." I sat back, watching him work, feeling the weight of the past few weeks start to shift. Emma thought she'd planned the perfect ambush, but she'd forgotten something critical. In combat, the guy who thinks they've won is usually the one who makes the fatal mistake. And Emma? She'd just made hers. Dave and I commandeered a corner booth at McMenamins, turning it into our war room. Empty coffee cups littered the table while we built our case, piece by damning piece. The waitress kept the caffeine flowing, probably wondering why 2 grown men were hunched over laptops at midnight, looking like we were planning a heist. "Timeline's crucial," Dave muttered, fingers flying over his keyboard. Judge needs to see this wasn't just opportunity. It was calculated. He pulled up a spreadsheet that tracked every suspicious transaction, every property change, every email. "Look here. She started moving money 3 weeks before you deployed. Small amounts at first." "Testing the waters," I said, remembering how Emma had casually mentioned needing to reorganize our accounts for simplicity back then. The memory tasted bitter now. My lawyer, Catherine, had done a complete 180 when we showed her the evidence. Gone was the cautious, measured tone. Now she was calling at all hours, firing questions, building connections. "This is exactly what we needed," she'd said, voice sharp with purpose. "The power of attorney abuse alone is serious. Combined with documented intent to defraud, we've got her." I worked through the night drafting my affidavit. Every word had to be precise, emotionless, factual, no matter how much it hurt to write about Emma's betrayal in cold, legal language. Dave kept me focused whenever I started to drift into anger. "Stick to dates and actions," he reminded me. "Let the evidence tell the story." The next morning, we met Catherine at her office. She'd cleared her schedule, and her conference room looked like a scene from a spy movie. Documents spread everywhere, timelines taped to walls, sticky notes creating constellations of fraud. "We need to file for emergency intervention," Catherine said, adjusting her reading glasses. "If they try to transfer or sell any property before the hearing—" "They will," Dave cut in. "Look at the pattern." "They're accelerating." Catherine nodded grimly and started drafting the motion. I watched her work, remembering how different this room felt 2 weeks ago when she'd told me our chances were slim. Amazing what solid evidence can do. The emergency motion went to Judge Metcalf's clerk by noon. We waited. Dave paced. I stared at my phone. Catherine made calls. At 4:47 p.m., we got word. Motion granted. By exactly 1 day. Any later, and we might have lost our shot. "It's enough," Catherine said, already pulling up another document. "Now we build a knockout punch." We worked straight through until evening, organizing exhibits, cross-referencing bank records with Emma's emails. Dave created flowcharts showing how money moved from our joint accounts through her consulting business and into the gym guy's pocket. Every dollar tracked, every transfer documented. Around 8, we finally broke for food. I headed to that little diner on Oak Street, the one with decent burgers and better coffee. That's when I saw them, Emma and her fiancé were walking out of Maggiano's across the street. She was wearing that blue dress I'd bought her last Christmas. He had his arm around her waist, and they were laughing about something. Really laughing. Head thrown back, not a care in the world kind of laugh. I froze by my truck, watching. They looked happy, like they'd just had a normal dinner, like they weren't in the middle of destroying someone's life, like Emma hadn't spent the last year meticulously planning to betray her husband while he was dodging bullets overseas. They didn't see me, just climbed into his new truck, the one bought with my VA loan, and drove off, still laughing. I stood there for a long moment, feeling something shift inside me. Not rage anymore, something colder, clearer, more focused. Back at McMenamin's, Dave looked up from his laptop as I set down fresh coffee. "You good?" I nodded slowly, thinking about Emma's laugh, about all those nights I'd spent missing her, about Duke sleeping in their bed now instead of waiting for me. "Let's finish it," I said. Dave's eyes narrowed slightly. He must have heard something in my voice. Then he nodded and turned back to the screen. "All right, brother, let's go to work." The morning hit like a gut punch, 42 degrees and drizzling. Perfect weather for what was coming. I stood in front of the motel mirror, adjusting the charcoal suit I hadn't touched since our wedding day. 8 years ago, Emma had straightened this same tie, kissed my cheek, and promised forever. The fabric still held a trace of the cedar block she'd stored it with. "Ready?" Dave asked from the doorway. I nodded, though my throat felt tight. "Let's do this." The courthouse steps were slick with rain. Inside, the fluorescent lights made everything feel stark, unreal. Our legal team huddled near the water fountain, reviewing last-minute details. Catherine's usual calm demeanor had an edge of intensity I hadn't seen before. "Remember," she whispered, "let me handle the talking. Just stay composed, no matter what they say." Courtroom 3 smelled like furniture polish and anxiety. Emma's side was already there, her lawyer in an expensive suit that probably cost more than my car, flanked by 2 paralegals. Emma sat behind them, wearing a cream-colored blouse that made her look almost angelic. The irony wasn't lost on me. You know that moment before a firefight when everything gets real quiet? When your training kicks in and the world narrows down to what matters? That's how it felt when Judge Metcalf entered. Everyone rose, then settled. Game time. Emma's lawyer went first, all polished confidence and rehearsed concern. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of marital dissolution. Mrs. Rourke simply seeks equitable distribution of assets acquired during..." I watched his performance, remembering how Emma used to practice her yoga studio pitch in front of the mirror. Same smooth delivery, same calculated pauses. "Furthermore," he continued, "Mr. Rourke's extended absences created an untenable situation. My client was effectively abandoned." My jaw clenched. Dave's hand touched my shoulder. Steady, grounding. Then Catherine stood up. The change in energy was immediate. Where Emma's lawyer had been all theater, Catherine was precision-guided steel. "Your Honor, before we continue, I'd like to present evidence of systematic financial fraud and abuse of power of attorney." She lifted the first document. "Beginning 6 months before deployment," the timeline went up on the projector. Clean, clinical, devastating. Each transaction highlighted in red, each transfer tracked. Emma's lawyer shifted in his chair. "Additionally," Catherine continued, "we have evidence of premeditated intent to defraud." She produced the email chain. "I direct the court's attention to this exchange between Mrs. Rourke and her current partner, dated 3 months into Mr. Rourke's deployment." The clerk began reading. I watched Emma's face as her own words filled the room. "Once the POA clears, we can move everything. He'll never know until it's done." Emma's composure cracked. Just a flicker, but I caught it. That slight widening of her eyes, the quick glance at her lawyer. She hadn't expected this. "Furthermore," Catherine pressed on, "Mrs. Rourke used Mr. Rourke's VA loan eligibility to purchase a vehicle for her partner." More documents appeared. A direct violation of fiduciary duty under state law. The judge leaned forward, studying the papers through wire-rimmed glasses. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes, they had that look I'd seen in senior officers when they'd caught someone in a lie. Emma's lawyer tried to recover, spouting procedure and precedent, but the damage was done. Even the paralegals looked uncomfortable. I scanned the gallery. No sign of the fiancé. Funny how quickly rats abandon ship. Judge Metcalf raised her hand, silencing Emma's lawyer mid-sentence. "I've heard enough for today." She gathered her papers with deliberate care. This case requires additional review. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. for final ruling." The gavel cracked like a gunshot. As people stood, I caught Emma's eye. For a moment, I saw past the makeup and practiced poise to something raw and scared. She looked away first, gathering her purse with trembling hands. Dave nudged me. "Come on, brother. Let's get some air." I followed him out, leaving Emma alone in the emptying courtroom. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained heavy with promises of more to come. 9 a.m. sharp. The same courtroom, but everything felt different. Maybe it was the morning light streaming through the high windows, or maybe it was knowing we had truth on our side. Either way, I sat straighter, breathed easier. Dave settled in beside me, coffee in hand. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "you fought back. Remember that." The gallery filled quickly. Seems word had gotten around that this wasn't going to be your typical divorce ruling. I spotted a few faces from Emma's yoga studio, probably hoping for drama. They weren't going to be disappointed. Her fiancé slipped in last minute, taking a spot near the back. He didn't even look at Emma, just scrolled through his phone like this was all beneath him. Emma kept glancing back at him, but he never met her eye. Remember how she used to look at me that way, seeking approval? Funny how patterns repeat. "All rise." Judge Metcalf entered with purpose, her robes crisp, her expression carved from granite. She settled into her chair, adjusted her glasses, and surveyed the room. The silence felt physical. Having reviewed the evidence presented yesterday, along with supplementary documentation provided by both parties, I'm prepared to deliver my ruling. She picked up a document, but I noticed she barely glanced at it. She knew exactly what she wanted to say. "This court takes particular interest in cases involving deployed service members," she began. "The power of attorney is a sacred trust, designed to protect those who protect us. Its abuse cannot, and will not, be tolerated." Emma's lawyer shifted in his chair. I watched his confidence drain with each word. "The evidence clearly demonstrates that Mrs. Rourke engaged in systematic financial misconduct during Mr. Rourke's deployment. The timeline of transactions, combined with documented intent to deceive, constitutes a clear violation of fiduciary duty." My heart hammered. Catherine squeezed my arm. "Therefore, this court orders the following. First, the property deed transfer is hereby reversed. Full ownership reverts to Michael Rourke, effective immediately." The air left Emma's lungs in a sharp gasp. Her hands began to shake. "Second, Mrs. Rourke's accounts are to be frozen pending full investigation and restitution of misappropriated funds. The use of VA loan benefits for unauthorized vehicle purchase is particularly troubling and has been referred to appropriate federal authorities." I glanced at the fiancé. He'd stopped scrolling, his jaw tight. "Finally, regarding the German Shepherd Duke, this court finds that Mrs. Rourke had no authority to unilaterally claim ownership of jointly acquired property. The dog is to be returned to Mr. Rourke's custody by close of business today." Emma's composure shattered. She pressed her hands to her face, shoulders trembling. Her lawyer leaned over, whispering something, but she shook her head sharply. "This ruling is final. Court is adjourned." The gavel fell. The gallery erupted in whispers. I sat still, letting it sink in. Dave clapped my shoulder, grinning. Catherine was already gathering papers, efficient as ever. A sharp movement caught my eye. The fiancé stood up, face dark with disgust. He looked at Emma, really looked at her, for the first time all morning. Then he turned and walked out, letting the heavy door swing shut behind him. Emma stared after him, mouth open slightly. She looked small suddenly, lost. Nothing like the woman who'd ambushed me in our driveway months ago. Her lawyer touched her arm, saying something about appeals, but she wasn't listening. She just sat there, hands trembling in her lap, utterly alone in the clearing courtroom. I stood up slowly, straightening my jacket. After all those nights in that cheap motel, all those declined cards and sympathetic looks, all those photos of my dog in another man's house, I'd won. Not just the house or Duke, but something bigger. My dignity, maybe. My faith in justice. Dave's voice cut through my thoughts. "Ready to go get your dog?" I nodded, gathering my files. The victory felt clean, earned. As we headed for the door, I heard a small sob from Emma's direction, but I didn't look back. Some wounds don't need a second glance to know they're fatal. The animal control officer handed me Duke's leash, but I barely had time to grip it before 80 pounds of German Shepherd crashed into my legs. His whole body wiggled with joy, tail whipping back and forth like a metronome gone haywire. He remembered. God, he remembered. "Someone's happy to see you," the officer said, smiling. Duke's wet nose pressed against my palm, his familiar scent hitting me like a punch to the gut. I scratched behind his ears, still his favorite spot, and he leaned in hard, nearly knocking me sideways. "Let's go home, buddy." The drive to the motel was a challenge. Duke kept trying to climb into my lap from the back seat, whining softly. I had to pull over twice just to reassure him I wasn't going anywhere. When we finally made it to my room, he burst through the door like he owned the place, sniffing every corner. Then he found my duffel bag, the one that still smelled like Kandahar dust, and everything hit me at once. Duke flopped down beside it, nose pressed against the canvas, tail thumping steadily against the thin carpet, just like he used to do when I'd come home from training weekends. My throat closed up. The room blurred. Before I knew it, I was on my knees beside him, face buried in his fur, shoulders shaking. All those months of holding it together, through the ambush at home, the legal battles, the humiliation, it all came pouring out while Duke just sat there, solid and real, letting me break. When I finally pulled myself together, Duke was still watching me with those steady brown eyes. I wiped my face with my sleeve, feeling lighter somehow. "Ready for a change of scenery?" The motel key made a quiet click on the dresser. I took one last look at the room that had sheltered my lowest moments, then shut the door on that chapter of my life. The drive home felt different this time. The new deed sat in my glove box like a battle trophy. Duke's head rested on my shoulder from the back seat, and even the autumn air seemed fresher. But walking through the front door, that was something else entirely. The house smelled wrong, like unfamiliar cologne and protein powder. Emma's yoga mat still lay rolled up in the corner. Her fiancé's running shoes sat by the door. I grabbed a contractor's trash bag from my truck and started methodically erasing their presence. Into the bag went her meditation cushion, his gym supplements, their shared coffee mugs. I stripped the bed down to the mattress, yanked their shower curtain down, and emptied every drawer. Duke followed me from room to room, tail wagging uncertainly at first, then with growing confidence as familiar furniture emerged from under their additions. The windows groaned as I forced them open, letting fresh air pour in. Duke's old bed went back in its corner, and his food bowl returned to its spot in the kitchen. I scrubbed every surface until my hands were raw, but it felt like reclaiming territory, like healing. Over the next week, I rebuilt our space piece by piece. The living room got a new coat of paint. Goodbye, Emma's mindful gray. Duke's toy box reappeared from the garage. I replaced their pretentious coffee station with my simple drip maker. The garage was last. I'd been saving it, knowing it would be the hardest. Emma had turned it into a home gym, complete with mirrors and rubber flooring. It took 2 solid days to tear it all out, haul in my workbench, and resurrect my tool wall. Duke supervised from his new bed by the door, looking more at home with each passing hour. Standing there in sawdust and sweat, I realized there was one last thing to handle. The county office opened at 9, and that property deed needed updating. One final signature to make everything official. Duke's tail thumped against the concrete floor as I grabbed my keys. The county office smelled like paper and tired coffee. You know that mix? I'd been there twice before, once to buy the house originally, then for Emma's power of attorney filing. Now I was back to wipe those memories clean. The clerk, a woman with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses on a chain, took my paperwork with practiced efficiency. Her eyes flickered with recognition as she scanned the court order. "Transferring sole ownership today?" She kept her tone neutral, professional. I appreciated that. "Yes, ma'am. Just me on the deed now." She nodded and started typing, her fingers making that steady click-click-click sound that reminded me of mission briefings. Duke would have hated it, but he was home napping in his favorite sunny spot by the back door. Previous deed showed 3 names, she mentioned, more to herself than to me. "This'll clean that right up." 3 names, mine, Emma's, and his. Seeing them linked together on paper had been like taking shrapnel to the chest. But now it was just paperwork, just forms to file and boxes to check. The printer hummed to life, spitting out crisp pages that would rewrite my future. The clerk arranged them with careful precision, pointing out where to initial and sign. Each stroke of my pen felt like setting something right in the universe. "That'll be $48 for the filing fee." I handed over my credit card, the new one, from my personal account. No more declined transactions, no more sympathetic looks from gas station clerks. the receipt printer whirred, and just like that, it was done. Walking out with that fresh deed felt different than I expected. Not triumphant exactly, more settled, like the world had finally clicked back into its proper alignment. The hardware store was my next stop. You ever notice how lumber yards have this particular smell? Part sawdust, part possibility. I loaded up my cart with pressure-treated 2x4s, a stack of pine boards, and 3 cans of semi-gloss paint in a deep navy blue. The kind of blue that means business. "Building something special?" the cashier asked as she rang up my supplies. "Something like that," I said, thinking about the workshop plans I'd sketched during those long nights at the motel. Starting fresh. The new workbench was my splurge. Solid maple top, steel frame, pre-drilled for mounting vices. Cost more than I'd usually spend, but sometimes you need to plant a flag, you know? Make a statement about where you're headed. I was unloading the truck when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Could have been anyone. Work, VA office, Dave checking in. But something in my gut knew. I let it ring. Duke wandered over as I stacked lumber against the garage wall, his nails clicking on the concrete. He had this way of tilting his head when he was concerned, like he was trying to figure out what you were thinking. The phone chirped, voicemail notification. I kept working, organized my new tools, mapped out where everything would go on the pegboard, but that little red notification light kept blinking, kept pulling at my attention like a loose thread. Finally, I hit play. Speaker on, volume low. "Mike?" Emma's voice wavered through the tiny speaker. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I need you to know I'm sorry. I lost myself somewhere along the way. Got caught up in, I don't even know what anymore." Duke's ears perked up at her voice, then flattened. Smart dog. "The things I did, I know sorry isn't enough. But delete. The garage felt quieter after that, but it was a good quiet. Clean. Like the silence after a storm passes. I picked up my tape measure and went back to work, Duke settling into his new bed by the door. Sometimes the best response is no response at all. Let the silence speak for itself. I had lumber to cut, plans to follow, and a workshop to build. The rest was just background noise fading away. Sunday morning hit different. Maybe it was the way the sunrise caught the dew on the lawn, or how Duke's paws made fresh tracks through the grass. But everything felt new, clean, like the world had hit some kind of reset button. I stood in the driveway, coffee mug warming my hands, and just looked at that garage door. Hadn't opened it since coming home. Funny how a simple roll-up door can hold so much weight, so many memories. You know that moment when you're about to step into something big? When your heart does this little skip step, like it's trying to catch up with where you're headed? That's where I was standing. Duke nudged my leg, his way of saying get on with it already. Smart dog. The door creaked a bit as I pulled it up, probably needed some WD-40. But that first burst of sunlight streaming in, man, lit up every dust mote, every cobweb, every forgotten corner, made the whole space look like some kind of cathedral. My new workbench stood there waiting, still wrapped in plastic. Maple top gleaming, steel frame solid as a tank. Duke padded over and settled beside it, head on his paws, like he was christening the spot as his new watching post. The lumber I'd bought was stacked neat against the wall, giving off that fresh-cut pine smell that always reminded me of possibility. Dave helped me haul it in yesterday, didn't say much, just nodded when he saw the setup. He got it. I pulled out my hammer, old reliable, been with me since before Kandahar. The weight felt right in my hand. First nail went in clean, that sharp crack echoing off the walls. Duke didn't even flinch. He knew we were home. My phone hadn't buzzed with any drama in days. Emma had gone ghost after that voicemail, her social media wiped clean. Word around town was her accounts were still frozen solid. The gym's Yelp page had turned into a war zone after someone leaked the court documents. Amazing how fast people turn when they realize they've been played. Her fancy fiancé deleted all their joint posts, scrubbed his profile. Last I heard, he was trying to sell that truck, the one bought with my VA loan. Good luck with that, buddy. I pulled the veteran's coin from my pocket, the one they gave us after Kandahar. Rolled it between my fingers, feeling the weight of everything it represented. All those nights in the desert, all those video calls home to empty promises. Set it down next to my coffee mug on the fresh sanded benchtop, looked right there. The morning light shifted, throwing long shadows across the concrete floor. Duke stretched, repositioned himself. His tail thumped against the workbench leg. his seal of approval. I stepped back, took it all in. The pegboard waiting for tools, the outline of where my table saw would go, the corner I'd marked out for Duke's bed. No trace of her yoga mats, no protein shake bottles, no remnants of betrayal. Just clean space and clear purpose. My space, my rules, my peace. You want to know something funny? All those months in the motel, plotting and planning, I thought getting even would feel like victory, like some kind of triumph. But standing there in my garage, watching dust motes dance in the sunlight while Duke dozed by my feet, I realized something. The best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting free. I picked up my hammer again, lined up another nail. The sound of metal meeting wood rang true and clean through the morning air. Behind me, the house sat quiet. My house. Every room, every wall, every memory now stripped clean and ready for whatever came next. The past was done, sealed up tight as a drum. No what-ifs, no maybe next times, no second chances needed. Trust, like respect, has to be earned. And revenge, well, sometimes the sweetest payback is simply building something new while they lose everything they stole. I reached down, gave Duke a scratch behind the ears, and got back to work. We had a workshop to build. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.